How are we doing, guys? How are you? What's up? The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been the most successful franchise in cinema history. There's never been anything like this. However, it's not a surprise for most of you to hear that it hasn't been doing well in recent years, at least in the opinion of many moviegoers. They think that the MCU has lost its spunk, all right? I'm not saying anything anyone doesn't already know by now. The last major Marvel movie that was in cinemas didn't do so hot, which has finally led a lot of people apparently to the point that we're at now, where people are asking, are they going to reboot the MCU if things just never get back on track? Apparently some people are saying this. At least we're writing a serious article today about that, okay? Today on CBR, the title of this article is Why a Reboot Won't Save the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm going to give you my thoughts, which I don't think anyone has openly discussed yet. At least I keep hearing the same, they're never going to do that. Look, they're never going to do that. Everyone that I keep hearing talking about this subject brings up points that are not going to happen. Spoiler alert, they are not going to reboot the MCU. Okay, it's not going to happen. It's not like DC that needed a reboot. They got off on the wrong foot right from the get-go, in my opinion. Very controversial opinion, by the way. But they got off on the wrong foot from the get-go. MCU, though, was on the right foot for a good decade plus, and in the last 4 years, they've been stumbling. They're not going to reboot the MCU because of that. Okay? Let me tell you what's really happening today on the show. All right, let's get the basics out of the way. The Infinity Saga of the MCU is widely accepted as some of the best Marvel content, and if not some of the best superhero content ever made. Yes, agreed. Oh my gosh, there have been so many great Marvel movies in the past. Civil War, The Winter Soldier. I really loved Spider-Man No Way Home. Iron Man 1. I mean, Endgame was great. That was an amazing collective experience in the theater. Spider-Man Far From Home was very good. Anyway, there've been so many good Marvel movies. We had a great run from 2012 to about 2019. It was better. As someone who's loved Marvel comics since they were a kid, I never thought that we would ever get movies made about the Avengers and Iron Man and all these characters, and that they would be so great. So, you know, in a way, we're all spoiled, really, because this all could have, in another multiverse, we could have never had the MCU Infinity Saga, or at least it could have been only half as good, or a quarter, right? But it turned out to be fantastic. Then it went downhill, and now people are saying, oh, should we reboot the MCU? Okay, they're not going to do that, first of all. Like, I feel like it's not even worth discussing the ins and outs of how that would happen, because they're not going to do that. But here's what I don't hear people talking about. What led us to the state that we're in, all right? It's three things. The real issue that no one's discussing is these three things. Number one, the reason that we're in the situation we're in right now is because Marvel needed to figure out a way to get the X-Men into the MCU. That's number one. We're going to talk about each one of these points. Number two, the Bob Chapek era was quantity over quality, and that forced all of Disney into totally the wrong trajectory, and it's going to take them years to get back on track, okay? Number three, the multiverse is a problem because multiverse stories are inherently nihilistic, and moviegoers just don't like that. Okay, should I really break each one of these down for you? Okay, I'll try to do that. We really don't have enough time in this video for me to do that. Just like the MCU lately, nobody's going to be satisfied here because I just don't have enough time to go into detail about all of these points, but we're going to try. Number one, when Disney bought Fox, they got the rights to the X-Men back, which was what we always wanted. As comic book fans, it's amazing that the MCU and Marvel has been as good as it was without the X-Men. I mean, they were able to bring up characters like Iron Man, which were like B superheroes, and make them A-list superheroes. You know, they did so many amazing things without the X-Men, which in the comics are their number one A-string team. So we would love to see the Avengers and the X-Men and all the wide-ranging characters of the Marvel universe interacting together in a shared universe. But how are you going to do that? Because it's such a problem. It's such a problem to try to bring the X-Men into the Marvel universe, which has already been established to not have mutants in it, because the mutants have so many important... This is a whole video in itself. I'm going to have to cut myself short. Look, for example, Wolverine's storyline is in the distant past. Magneto's storyline starts in the 1940s, and a lot of those storylines are pivotal. You can't just have the mutants just start popping up. I mean, I guess you could, but that's going to be problematic. There's too much nuance and detail to explain here, but I think the reason that they have started to push the MCU into the multiverse saga after the Infinity Saga was because Kevin Feige was looking for a way to bring the X-Men in, and he wasn't quite sure how to do that. I've heard stories, actually. He has not been quite sure how to bring the X-Men in. And I think the plan was, let's just fire off a bunch of different scenarios in each movie, and then we'll just see which one we like the best and which one works cinematically, and we'll just lean into that trajectory. Because during the Infinity Saga, a lot of things were kind of winged. I mean, they planned it. Yes, they plotted it out. They knew where they wanted to go in the end. But for example, with like Civil War, that movie kind of popped up. It was off the radar, and Kevin Feige kind of leaned into that. Once they got the rights to Spider-Man, a bunch of elements were happening. So Marvel capable of winging it and moving in the direction of what's working best for them. However, with this multiverse saga and wanting to figure out a way to bring the X-Men in, the problem is all of these multiverse stories are kind of oversaturated, and they all kind of feel nihilistic. Now, I mean, you look at stories like Rick and Morty, but the way Rick and Morty did it made it super entertaining because they made it a comedy where it's a satire of the concept, right? But when you're playing the multiverse straight, it sort of implies that it doesn't really matter who lives or dies because there's just another copy of you in another multiverse, and we could just go get that person. In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, it opens with one of Doctor Strange dying, and you're just like, oh, I guess I don't care about that Doctor Strange because he wasn't the real one that I care about from my universe. So I'm only supposed to care about the characters from my multiverse, but there's infinite copies of them. So, you see what I'm saying? Nihilism, meaning it starts to imply that nothing really matters, and the audience is starting to feel like nothing really matters. So, that's a problem. All I'm saying is that's a problem. So maybe they need to close the door on these multiverse stories, but, you know, the whole point was to bring the X-Men in. This is all my scientific hypothesis, okay? Okay, here's the bigger problem, though. Number 2, or number 3. I kind of mixed 1 and 3 together. Here's the bigger problem, though. The Bob Chapek era happened after the Bob Iger era, all right? About when the pandemic started, Bob Chapek came in, and he took over for Bob Iger, who had been super successful and had been there since the launch of the MCU, the most successful movie franchise of all time. Disney had been super profitable. Everybody's stocks are up. Everybody's happy. He leaves on the highest note. And then Bob Chapek comes in, and we have the beginning of the streaming wars, and Disney Plus starts, and we've got to put content on Disney Plus. We've got to pull everybody's eyeballs towards that, and there's a pandemic. A lot of factors happening here, and they lean towards total quantity over quality. And he enforces this policy, which we've only heard about recently, where they wanted to crank out as much Marvel content as they could over the year. And what did we get? We got so many Disney Plus shows. I stopped caring. I stopped watching them because the quality just dipped bad. A lot of people are making these wild theories about Marvel losing its way. But the thing, as an artist, artists don't work well under ridiculous pressure and timelines. If you push artists to go too fast, the quality is gonna drop significantly. When has it ever worked out better for a business to push quantity over quality? Like, you guys tell me, when has that ever been better for some business? I don't understand why they decided to do that, but that's one of the biggest factors that got us to where we are now. IMO. I mean, from 2020 to 2023, how many Disney Plus Marvel shows were there? There was like one popping up every 2 or 3 months, and a lot of them just weren't good. As a huge Marvel fan, I did not finish watching a lot of them. They just didn't feel like they mattered. And it's not because Robert Downey Jr. isn't there. It's not because Chris Evans wasn't there. It's because the quality dropped off significantly because they were trying to crank out so much content. Online, I'm seeing everyone talking about, oh no, they killed off Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man, and they killed off Captain America, and that's why the audiences aren't interested. That's not it. It was the Bob Chapek era of quantity over quality. And it's because the multiverse is inherently nihilistic. Those are my biggest factors. But the good news is, I do not think that it's worth seriously considering rebooting the MCU because it is possible to get things back on track. And I think now that Bob Iger is back at Disney and he's going to push things back in the opposite direction of quality first, make sure we have a solid story before we even consider making the movie, which should always be the case. Now, the artists, directors, and writers will have enough time to craft compelling, interesting, inspired stories. That's the key word, inspired, because when you push people to go too fast, they lose their inspiration. Yes, you'll get a product, you'll get a story written, you'll get a movie made, but it won't be an inspired story. Because inspiration isn't a part of you. It comes from somewhere else. It comes when it comes, okay? You gotta give artists enough time for it to come. Like, it's amazing to me how many of these I've worked at a lot of companies in Hollywood, and it is amazing how many of these corporate people don't understand the artistic process at all. And it's also amazing how many of these giant companies don't have any real artists working there at all. And so they're totally pushing themselves in the direction of capitalism, maximize profits, minimize costs, without any artist to help guide them towards making the product that needs to be at the level it needs to be. For any of that to work, for any of that maximizing profit to matter, you have to have a good product too. And you can't try to just crank it out as fast as possible, as much as possible. Here's another important factor that I don't hear anyone ever mentioning, but there are not an infinite supply of amazingly talented writers and artists and directors to make Marvel movies out there. There's just not an infinite supply of them. There are some filmmakers out there that are incredibly passionate about Marvel. They grew up with Marvel stories in their childhood and they want to make a Marvel movie more than anything else. They're super inspired to be here and do that. But those artists are rare. Those directors, those filmmakers are rare. They are not infinite. And when you push yourself to make too much content too fast, you don't have enough filmmakers to go around. And you end up hiring people that just don't really care. They're just there to do a job. Marvel has got to get back on track by finding the passionate filmmakers that are inspired to make a Marvel story. They exist for sure, but they are not in infinite supply. Anyway, we're in the process of reversing that flow, but it's going to take a couple of years to get things back on track. Anytime a new CEO or head of the company comes in, it takes a while for the company to pivot back in the right direction. And so I think it's the right decision to slow down on how fast we're putting out Marvel content in the MCU. And we're only getting one MCU movie this year with Deadpool and Wolverine, and that's a good decision. It was also a great decision to make X-Men 97. That is the most exciting thing, hands down, that Marvel has done since Endgame. So these are good signs, potentially. And like I said, Kevin Feige is willing to pivot when he sees what works. And so if Deadpool and Wolverine works, X-Men 97 works, he will pivot from there. Again, this is all speculation. IMO. Nobody knows for sure what they're doing, but Marvel has surprised me so many times in the past. Yes, it was during the Infinity Saga, but they have surprised me so many times in the past. They're totally capable of surprising us all again, and there's no reason to take these conversations seriously. That's just my opinion. Thanks for watching today, guys. I really went off the script and I went way too far. But if you want to know more about considerations of should we reboot the Marvel Cinematic Universe, check out our website on CBR.com. I winged this entire thing. I winged this entire video, just like Kevin Feige is going to wing things in the right direction, okay? See the connection I'm making? I've been Tyson XIX, and I'll see you here next time.